Welcome to this episode of The Shamrock. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Matt Fortuna, who is in a poorly Wi-Fi connected room in Washington, D.C. And today, special guest, he's half of the Solid Verbal, Ty Hildenbrandt. And, you know, Ty, when I sent out the invite for this, I was half joking that this was a podcast, but also a therapy session, but only half joking, because I do think that Notre Dame fans are in need of some therapy. And if anyone saw your Instagram video over the weekend after the Marshall loss, like maybe you could use a little talk therapy too.
Yeah. And to be clear, first off, thank you for the invite, guys. It's always a pleasure. Secondly, just so everybody at home knows that Pete is serious about this, he named the Zoom room the Shamrock Therapy Session. So maybe more than half or less than half joking about the therapy angle here. It was a weekend. It was a weekend for Notre Dame fans, and frankly, Notre Dame beat media. Because when I listen to the Solid Verbal and I hear references to like about the season going off the track, and like, man, you read the beat reporters, I like that. It cuts, man. Like I know that cuts me, because I know I feel like I was part of the problem, as if I was the one that threw the pick six in the fourth quarter in some ways. Well, I mean, but it's all of you guys, and I say that lovingly, because I read as much Notre Dame as I can. I'm not perfect. Obviously, you're all a lot more zoomed in to Notre Dame football than I am. That's why you're all so good at what you do. But you know, a lot of times, and we see this with other teams when we're going through and trying to prep for what we do on the Solid Verbal every weekend, beat writers oftentimes are in conflict with one another. Like, not open conflict, like a hot war of sorts, but you say different things or different angles, or somebody is trying to get an edge and say something new. In this case, nope. You're kind of all saying the same thing. It's even the stats. If you look at the advanced stat, everybody is saying the exact same thing about Notre Dame football right now. And so, at least in that sense, it makes it easier to follow. It doesn't make it any more exciting to watch, but at least we have a general sense based on your reporting and based on stats and other sources what's going on here.
It's funny because I'm in DC for athletic director meetings, and truly man and woman last night, I think everyone I saw, they recognized me as the guy who does mostly Notre Dame. It's, man, what's going on, Marcus? Man, is everything okay? And so, like, it's almost as if like there's a sick relative or something going on. It's pretty funny, I guess, for lack of a better term, the cause for concern nationally after an 0-2 start. But Ty, I'm curious, obviously we saw your video, but how do you process this in real time? What's kind of your game day routine? And is it maybe a little less intense for Marshall going in, given what we thought would end up happening that game?
Oh, it was definitely less intense for Marshall. I mean, Pete and I talked a little bit before we hit record. Notre Dame fans penciled this in as a win. And why wouldn't you? They were a 20-point favorite. Why wouldn't you? There was all this offseason hype. Why wouldn't you? They have an absolutely loaded roster of talent. And, you know, I mean, we can debate the merits of that and where it's weaker or whatnot, but still, pound for pound, they should be a lot better than Marshall. And so, yeah, the game day experience, the build up to the game from a fan's perspective, I think was a totally different standpoint than what we saw in week one, where, look, I thought, held their own fairly well against Ohio State, at least in real time for that game. It felt like they held their own pretty well and like it was kind of a winnable game. The Marshall game was winnable as well, as you guys both know, but in real time, you're just sort of, I think at one point I tweeted out that the game felt like a caffeine crash. Like, what's going on here? You just keep waiting for things to ignite, for the offense to find that spark. And it was a big old waiting game. Then Tyler Buckner gets hurt and things start to unravel very quickly down the stretch. It was a very frustrating 60 minutes of football to watch as a fan, because you just kept waiting for it to get better, and it frankly never did.
I think on your podcast you said it was enough to make you like, wait a minute, do I miss Ian Book? Like, where?
Yeah,
I didn't know if you were like, man, I can't believe I already went there.
Yeah, a little bit of an identity crisis, Pete, if I'm being real. Like, I for the better part of 2 years on our show, I was not kind to Ian Book. And winning as quarterback in Notre Dame history, was obviously a really good leader on that team.
and was able to run that offense with despite some of his physical limitations with, throwing the ball downfield, or maybe that was more of a scheme thing. You guys would know better than me, but regardless, it felt like there was an extra gear that Notre Dame could not tap into when he was a starting quarterback. And I talked about that for about 2 years straight, despite the success that Notre Dame had on the field. And now this year, where you don't necessarily have that kind of senior leadership, whether it's with Book or Jack Cohn or someone else. And it's gotten a lot more interesting at quarterback. And definitely wondered a little bit like, what would Ian Book have done here?
I thought we would all experience that last year. Not that I didn't have faith in Jack Cohn, but I think he ended up being a lot better than I anticipated coming into the season. And because to your point, yes.
You were at the Virginia Tech game. Like at that point, I think plenty of people were missing Ian Book. Like I think you remember how it ended with Jack Cohn, but the first month and a half of the season, like the Toledo game,
none of that was Jack Cohn's fault, though. Toledo, those games. I mean,
other than the 27 sacks.
that was the offensive line, as it is this year in many cases. I mean, I thought everyone would miss Ian Book more last year because Notre Dame went 11-1. That didn't exactly play out that way, but great segue into this weekend. Drew Pyne's making his first career start. Ty, how are you processing all this? I hate to put it in this context, but I almost feel like because Buckner didn't play all that well in his 2 games, this isn't a sky is falling, we're 0-2 and our starting quarterback is hurt kind of approach. I think it's almost like, all right, here we go. Buckle up. We already know it's going to be a bit of a rocky season. Let's get weird here.
Yeah, let's get weird. Notre Dame football 2022 can use that on shirts and whatnot. Somebody called in. We have a voicemail line every weekend, and somebody called in and said that maybe it was a tweet, maybe it was a call, maybe it was both. But the comment was Drew Pyne was so excited to get in the game. He got on that field quicker than any backup quarterback ever. At first sight of Tyler Buckner maybe being nicked up, he clearly wanted to be out there, and it didn't go as well as I'm sure he would like. But how am I processing? I am conflicted, because when we saw flashes of Drew Pyne in the past, he definitely gave them a little bit of spark. Like we have seen that from Drew Pyne. I don't know if it's his leadership style, just his personality, the way he played. I don't know what it is, but there is a little bit of Ian Book in him in that sense that he was able to kind of rally the troops. What gives me, I think, a healthy bit of cynicism with regard to Pyne is a lot of what I've read from UP, which is in the springtime, the battle between him and Buckner was Drew Pyne throwing a lot of interceptions and everybody not feeling good about that. So, and then we saw another big interception this past weekend. So if he could stay away from those pitfalls and if he can do more of the Book stuff, then again, weird identity crisis. I think I'm okay with that, but I will wait to see how he performs in this new role where he's not just kind of like the fun guy coming in off the bench. Now suddenly there's the weight of the world on his shoulders.
I think that you could put Drew Pyne and a little bit of spark like as a fantasy things item in the future.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's pretty much how he's always described. Like, Drew Pyne, a little bit of spark there. That's pretty much his MO. And like we talked to him yesterday at Access, and this is not breaking news, but if you saw him, like Ty Hildenbrandt and Drew Pyne built similarly.
Oh no.
I'm just saying, like,
you don't want to say that.
He is somebody. If you were in a restaurant with him, as I was working at a place by Eddy Street Commons last week. Drew Pyne was there, and I had to do a triple take. Like, is that Drew Pyne? I think that's Drew Pyne. I'm not sure. Now is that? I don't know. But like the Notre Dame quarterback usually is not somebody you have to do a triple take to figure out if that's who it is. But I mean, Drew Pyne is slightly built. He is all in on Notre Dame. Like he talked
extensively about going to the Basilica and the Grotto and all that. Like, he is kind of a central casting Notre Dame quarterback, other than the fact that he's 5'10" and looks like he could host a podcast with Dan Rubenstein.
I was going to say the limits, the upper limits of my athletic ability at this stage in life is like backyard cornhole. And otherwise, I sit on a chair in front of 2 monitors and a Shure SM7B many hours per week doing this. That is the upper limit of where I'm at athletically. If you're confusing me, or if I could be confused with the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement. But the fact that he's all in, the fact that he's excited about the opportunity, and that he has given them a little bit of spark. I don't want to make expectations here that are unrealistic. I'm certainly not doing that. I am skeptical about this whole thing, but like, if he can give them a little bit of spark, they could use a little bit of spark on offense. You've seen the numbers.
They have no spark. There's no spark happening right now.
There's no spark whatsoever. So, any spark, any net positive in the spark department would be a good thing.
All I heard when you said 5'10", looks like Ty, I'm picturing Stetson Bennett. Last I checked, that guy just won a national title. So
there you go,
I think Notre Dame is fine.
Now we're pumping the sunshine. I like it.
Our next partner is a pretty cool product. Let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking for better gut health, more energy, or a stronger immune system in a really easy, natural way, you've got to check out Athletic Greens. It supports better sleep quality and recovery. It also supports mental clarity and alertness, and I think every college football fan could use a little bit more of that on Sundays. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with a convenient daily nutrition boost, especially heading into the cold and flu season. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And so, to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/CFB22. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/CFB22 to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. It's college football season, which means you need SLING TV, where you can watch unbeatable college football coverage starting at $35 a month. Get everything you love about college football, rivalries, marching bands, bowl games, conference power rankings, all of it with SLING. Plus, SLING has all the big games on the biggest networks: ESPN, ESPN2, SEC Network, ACC Network, Fox, and the Big Ten Network, all for the best price. And the best part is, getting SLING is easy. It's easy to set up and even easier to use. You can stream on any device and record up to 50 hours with included DVR space. Plus, you won't need to get locked into any long-term contracts. So if you're looking for the perfect place to spend your Saturdays, you need to take a look at SLING, where you can get everything you love about college football for the best price. Check out sling.com for special offers. SLING, the live TV you love for a price you love. Try us today.
You approach Marshall, like most, thinking, I think this is going to be a win, and my game day routine isn't going to be as intense. How do you approach Cal 0-2, knowing that Cal, outside of maybe UNLV, is probably the easiest opponent Notre Dame has left on this schedule this year? Like, how do you gear up for this game? Like, what's the mindset? I know I think the line's around 10 right now. It's been moving based on the quarterback news, but there's definitely a sense, at least for me and Pete, like, well, if you get pushed around by Marshall, who won't you get pushed around by? And I don't know how that changes.
Yeah. I mean, the first approach is bet Cal plus 10.5. You guys can't, I can. And I might, just if only as a reverse jinx option to try and get further spark going here. Cal's offense is really bad. And that has been the MO for the last couple years running now for the Golden Bears. So you look at what Cal has done their first 2 games against 2 bad teams. I mean, UC Davis is an FCS team, and UNLV is about as close to an FCS program as you're going to get, though they've improved a little bit. And it's not like Cal was blowing the doors off of either of those teams. So, going forward, again, I'm hesitant to say that this should be a win, but this should be a freaking win. This should be an easy win for Notre Dame. What I think will be interesting here is Cal does play good defense. that has also been their calling card the last couple of years. And again, the numbers through 2 weeks, opponent adjusted, all that sort of bears that out again. So this will be a good challenge for Notre Dame's line to hopefully improve on some level. It'll definitely be a good challenge for Drew Pyne as he steps into that starter role. It will give them a test on some level that they need on offense to hopefully build some momentum and make this thing better the rest of the way. And defensively, I hope it gives them a little bit of a breather because Cal is so bad. I mean, they just are on offense. I would hope that this would give the opportunity to the front seven, especially, to eat a little bit more than they've been eating. You know, they're good at tackling in the open field in most cases, but through 2 games, they haven't done a whole lot behind the line of scrimmage. And, you know, those havoc plays that I know we all kind of tune our attention into have just not been there through the first 2 weeks for this front seven. So with any amount of luck, it gives both sides of the ball exactly what they need. The defense an opportunity to build some momentum, and the offense a chance to go up against a pretty good defense and start to figure things out.
Do you look at Marcus Freeman any differently now than 2.5 weeks ago? Like, is there any side eye coming your way towards Notre Dame's head coach, or like, I was interested in how you feel, because we spent a lot of time talking about what is the honeymoon. I've always said it's like a grace period. Like, the grace period to me was going to go from the first loss after Ohio State. I thought that was going to be in November, not a week later. But as you know, a Notre Dame fan, like I was interested in how your perception of the head coach has changed, if at all, in the last couple of weeks.
Well, he's had 3 winnable games now as head coach. If you go back to the bowl game, the Oklahoma State game, they should have won. The Ohio State game, we can debate what winnable looks like, but it was close enough that a few plays in one direction could have changed that one. And certainly Marshall was there. So that's not a great start. And I think it is definitely a huge come down from all of the off-season hype that we had around Notre Dame, how the program is changing. It's getting younger. Recruiting has been off the charts. Everybody excited inside the program for this new regime. Brian Kelly jokes aplenty. All these things that we kind of leaned on in the offseason to get hyped for this season have now, in a sense, come crashing down. I think you pointed it out, rightfully so, Pete, on one of your recaps that you posted on The Athletic about how now officially the honeymoon is over for Marcus Freeman. Like it's over. To whatever was there before, the goodwill to some extent is gone. I don't think I look at him differently as a coach. I think he's learning on the job. And I think this is a really hard job. It's easy to forget that, especially as fans. You want to win every time, especially with the teams that Notre Dame has a chance to play every year. There's some quality opponents year in and year out. You want to expect wins in those games. And when it feels like there's no momentum, when it feels like there's no spark, when it feels like something is wrong and we can't necessarily put our finger on it, that can be really disconcerting. And if we know it, he knows it too. It's not just Freeman. It's Tommy Rees, right? Tommy Rees has stepped into more of an expanded role as well. And I know he's made comments to the extent of, gotta own this. I'm in charge of the offense now on some level. This is my fault. So I think these are guys who are pretty self-aware. They know to look within and evaluate constantly what they're doing. I think Freeman will get it figured out. There's no question about it that if he left Notre Dame tomorrow, there would be several dozen other potentials out there that would want Marcus Freeman's services. So it certainly has not gotten off to the start that Notre Dame fans would like, but I'm still fairly optimistic that he'll get this thing figured out in due time and get things going in the right direction. It's just a really hard job to learn on.
We had Mike Golick Jr. on last week, and again, this was pre-Marshall, and he talked about the transition from a known commodity in Brian Kelly to a excitable younger guy with Marcus Freeman. And he said, it's not a perfect analogy, but it reminds you of the 49ers. You know what you're getting with Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a ceiling there. You're going to take a chance with Trey Lance and weather the storm, and hopefully to have a higher ceiling. And after the Niners, after Notre Dame lost to Marshall, and after the Niners blew it against Justin Fields and the Bears, I texted him saying you were 100% on point for all the wrong reasons. Good job. But what do you think Ty, look, I'm sure you have a lot of friends who are Notre Dame fans. Like me and Pete have been texting a million people all week, and I got everything back from like Matt Bayless is over the hill. They're getting tired in the fourth quarter to Harry Heastand's a great developer, a talent, but not a great developer of lines. Like every theory you could think of has been thrown out this way. I mean, you said earlier, you can't point to just one thing here and say it's a quick fix, but how have you processed this? What do you think is kind of the biggest identity crisis with this team right now?
Well, the line's pretty bad.
Which one?
Well, let's start with the offense.
Yeah.
The offensive line that has been, I referenced earlier how many of the folks who are very zoomed in on Notre Dame football are saying the same stuff with respect to the offensive line and the scheme around it. And that is that the scheme around it does not even recognize that the line stinks right now. That they're almost continuing on as if they have a good line when in fact they do not. And that to me seems like the biggest issue, at least for the moment. We have grown all too comfortable over the Brian Kelly era. Gradually so, he built that line into something that was the bedrock for the team. Don't have that this year. It's still taking flight to an extent. I looked at the PFF grades, which, it's all subjective, so you use it as a data point. But Jared Patterson, who was supposed to be their best offensive lineman, and granted, coming back from injury in this game against Marshall, but he was their lowest graded offensive lineman in that matchup. Can't happen. Needs to get better. And whether it's Harry Heastand taking some extra time to kind of find his way here with this unit, I don't know what it's going to take in order to get that thing humming up front, but that to me seems like the biggest issue on offense, aside from the fact, we could talk about wide receivers and running backs and quarterbacks. There's a lot to go around on offense. We could point the finger 1,000 different directions, but if the offensive line makes the mistakes that it's made and can't communicate better the rest of the way, we're in for a long season here. And so I think I would start there. Defensively, the offense hasn't given them much of a breather. Been a lot of underwhelming offense, turning it over to the defense and hoping they can make a play, kind of a thing. And that really puts the defense in a bind as well. So I don't know. Again, there's 1,000 things here, but like the rest of you, I probably start with the offensive line.
I was interested as a guy who you were a fan during Reese's playing career, if that is difficult for fans to divorce from Reese, the coordinator. And we had this conversation with Golick, because I'll get questions that are like, the media gives Reese a pass because he played at Notre Dame. I actually feel like the reverse is true, that Reese takes more shit because he played here, because people remember Reese, the quarterback, and sort of everything that he wasn't. When you hear Tommy Reese, are you thinking like play caller, or do you think more about the guy with not a live arm, who couldn't move, who wasn't ever Golson?
Yeah. Can you guys hear this? Let me see if I can. Oh, I can't play it. I was going to play my Tommy Reese sound that I use in the podcast. We've joked about Tommy Reese for years as Reesus. Reesus is back to save the day. I wasn't a huge Tommy Reese fan when he was playing quarterback, and that was probably some aspect of my youth and the need to be snarky getting in the way of actually evaluating what he did, and he stepped in a really important way for Notre Dame football during his playing days, and probably didn't get enough credit for the job that he did do. Now, as a coordinator, I find that I want to give him every benefit of the doubt. I really want him to succeed, because from the moment he stepped on campus, this is back to when he was a player, heard a lot about his leadership, heard a lot about, he comes from a family with a coach. His dad is a coach. And so this is a guy who you could see being on the fast track to being a coach. And lo and behold, now he's a coordinator, right? When Brian Kelly was left with the option of giving Reese that job and or risking him walking to take a job elsewhere, they wanted to keep him. Everybody likes playing for him from the sounds of it. They all like Tommy Rees a great deal. And so I want him to succeed. And as a fan that pays attention, I definitely have a sense of, I'm almost like proud that he decided to stick around when he had the option to go to LSU, and he wanted to stick around and help build this thing up, almost like a Varsity Blues type of, we're fighting back against being abandoned kind of a thing.
Brian Kelly as John Voight.
Yeah. Like I think about that with Rees, and as a Notre Dame fan, it really makes me want to root for him. On some level, though, the reckoning is coming because the results haven't been there. And granted, it's early. Granted, more of an expanded role for him. Granted, now his chosen starting quarterback, is out for the season. He's going to have some challenges to overcome here. It's not too late to put together a good season. It did not start out the way we wanted, but it's still not too late. It's just the pressure has been ratcheted up in a way that nobody could have expected. And it will be interesting to see what he does. I mean, again, he has taken some degree of ownership for this. He's not blaming people. He says that I'm in charge and I need to figure out a way to make this thing better. So definitely rooting for him, but can also see the writing on the wall coming a little bit. Like, just as a fan, we're going to get to a point, maybe like week 8, where, okay, if this thing doesn't feel like it's going in a better direction, then the next obvious question to ask is Tommy Rees really good at this, or are we just kind of blinded by our own Notre Dame fandom to have a former Notre Dame player in there running things?
Coming into the year, I think Pete, myself, a lot of people thought 10-2 would be a really good season, given the schedule, given there's a new head coach. I think Vegas had the over-under at 8.5. In your mind right now, sitting at 0-2, looking at what's ahead, all these unknowns, could you put a number? Can you put a record on, like, all right, if I look up at the end of the day and we went 7-5 or 8-4, whatever it is, I could say, like, we showed progress throughout the course of the year, and I'm excited about what year 2 brings. Like, can you put yourself there yet, or is it just let's get through Cal and see what happens next?
Well, we on our show, we've definitely started looking forward and talking about what does the rest of the way look like for Notre Dame. By my count, there are 6 losable games still on the schedule. Doesn't mean they're losing all of them, but North Carolina plays offense. BYU plays offense. Stanford apparently can play some degree of offense and always gives Notre Dame fits. There's also a Syracuse team that is weirdly very good so far through 2 weeks. Clemson and USC on the road to close out the season. So, those are some heavy hitters, especially with where this team is at. I think it starts this week with Cal. If they can just, if we can come out of this game feeling like there is some progress along the offensive line, if Drew Pyne goes out there and is not a disaster and can get some rapport going either with Mayer or Lorenzo Styles or, whoever else in the receiving core, if it can feel like there is some positive momentum coming out of that Cal game, again, a team with a pretty good defense, that would be a start. Next week at North Carolina, I mean, if the offense can't get its act together this week against Cal, it's going to have to next week against North Carolina, because the only thing North Carolina can do is score points. They won't stop you from scoring points, but if you're not in a position where you can go out there and put up 50 points to win a shootout, you're probably not going to win that game. We saw that in week 1 against App State. So, that is, I think, what I am most intrigued by now as we move forward. I'm not so much putting a number on it, Matt, because it's probably premature to do so now that there's going to be a new starting quarterback in there. I am more approaching this from the standpoint of I'm looking at these teams on the schedule, and I am seeing some opportunities here for real losses unless Notre Dame can get its act together on offense, because North Carolina, BYU, Syracuse, certainly USC, all those teams are going to score points. They're going to score points this year. And whether or not they play defense is kind of irrelevant. You got to be able to score with them. Hopefully we'll find out a little bit more about that this week when we see what Drew Pyne can do. But definitely skeptical that 10-2 is on the table. I see a couple projections out there that have it anywhere from 9-3, still 9-3, all the way down to like 6-6. So I think the range of possible options, or range of possible options is not the word, possibilities, is definitely widened a bit from where we expected, or at least I expected at the start of the year.
As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a job in minutes on LinkedIn to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job to the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile and spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free on linkedin.com/shamrock. That's linkedin.com/shamrock to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
I had a question like on this topic in my mailbag today, and I sort of answered it similarly about like, I really like, until there's a win, I'm not going to tell you what I think that the final record is going to be, because there's just like no floor to stand on quite yet. But I think the more interesting part of that question is, I got a lot of sort of feedback in the offseason. It's like, okay, what do you want to see from there? If you put the record aside, what do you want to see that makes you feel good about where Notre Dame is going? And like, first on my list was always that you saw Tyler Buchner look like a dude by the end of the year, that they had a difference maker at quarterback. That obviously is totally off the table. Like, that's completely blown up. And I was having a hard time coming up with like, what's something I could see from Notre Dame by the end of the year that would make me feel like, okay, things are moving in a good direction. Is there anything for you that you're like, okay, record aside, if I could at least see these two things, then as a Notre Dame fan, I would feel good about where things are going with Marcus Freeman.
Yeah. Do you remember way back in the days of yore when Brian Kelly first took over?
Oh, yes.
And I remember those teams, especially the team, I think his first year, where it wasn't the best team that he ever fielded, but they fought. I mean, we joke on our program all the time about teams that are plucky, teams that are frisky, that are just in every game. And, there was that quality to some of those early Brian Kelly teams that at least left you with the impression, okay, they go into a bowl game, they win, they fight, they win, or it's a close loss, whatever. Like it just felt like some of those early teams really had a lot of fight in them. And so separate from the record and separate from any kind of improvement, let's say at the center position, a specific thing that we could point to, I think it starts with that feeling like there is fight here. What I felt as a fan, again, I'm not on the field. Okay, what do I know? I'm an idiot with a microphone. But I could tell you as a fan.
You're Drew Pyne. You're Drew Pyne.
I'm Drew Pyne, apparently. I got 4 years of eligibility left. What it felt like as a fan watching that game was almost demoralizing down the stretch, especially after Buchner got hurt. Like, they haven't moved the ball all game, or they haven't been great or efficient at moving the football all game. What do we have to go on that they're going to do it now? Right. And I would just like to feel a little bit more fight, a little bit more of that friskiness, however you quantify that as the first thing. The second thing, honestly, outside of the quarterback and the line, which we've already defined, I would like to see somebody else step up out wide. It would be nice to know that there are more options other than Lorenzo Styles and Michael Mayer, because if those are the only two options, teams will game plan around that. And they will force you to check down or throw to, Chris Tyree out of the backfield or something like that takes away the threat of any kind of downfield game. It would be nice to see somebody step up in that receiver room, whether it's a name that we know or a name that we don't yet. That would be nice, and I think would be, a good thing to build on, certainly moving forward.
There's a sense, at least for me, I just think it's almost like, obviously everyone took a little bit for granted Brian Kelly winning all those games that he was supposed to win and doing it in sometimes boring fashion. But there's a sense right now to me, like, and maybe you see this, when you talk about them on your show, Notre Dame's kind of just like everybody else right now. You don't know what you're going to expect from them every single week. And I don't know the last time we were able to say that, maybe probably 2016. But I just think they've kind of been pulled down for the rest of the college football world. And they're part of this sport we love because it's weird. And Washington State beats Wisconsin and a bunch of Sun Belt teams upset, Power 5 teams. And Notre Dame was always immune to that because it was like, oh, they're a favorite. They're going to win. And, oh, they're playing Clemson. Maybe they'll keep it close, or maybe they'll win if Trevor's out, but they're not going to win. I just feel like in the larger college football ecosystem, they've become a major player, at least as far as, entertainment value, because you just don't know what you're going to get out of them every week.
Well, and they're also in transition. We talked a lot in the build up to this season about how many unknowns there were going into 2022. We're through 2 weeks of the season. We've seen already an incredible volume of upsets. And if only in week 2, right? It was pretty intense last week. In many ways, that tracks closely with what we were saying all off season long, which was we're going to go into the season and we don't know much about anybody. There's a lot that remains to be known about so much of college football, not just Notre Dame. Notre Dame at least has the excuse of being in transition. And so if that makes them more entertaining, and if there is a grace period for Marcus Freeman, it would make sense that it'd be this year, before he gets some of his recruits in there, before he really gets this thing figured out against a tough schedule. Like you could understand that element of it, why they feel like everybody else from an entertainment value standpoint. If you're Texas A&M, it's a harder case to make because you're not in transition. You're not hiring a new coach. Your recruiting has only amplified over the last couple of years. To go out there and lose in the manner that they did to App State is way worse than what Notre Dame did against Marshall last week. It's just night and day. So I get it. I think it is easy to kind of break the glass in case of the emergency here for Notre Dame because they're off to an 0-2 start. It's certainly not good. I have had no shortage of jokes on my end as a Notre Dame fan, both directed at me and coming from my mouth about this team. But at the same time, it's understandable given the amount of change that they have gone through. I'm still confident that Marcus Freeman's the guy who could turn that around. But like we've been saying here, it's that reckoning will get there sooner than later, where we have to ask the question, is this working?
So I want to pivot off Notre Dame to the solid verbal. And I've been meaning to ask you this for a while. Now that Mike Gundy is 55 and you can still be happy for a day for you to steak, will the intro ever be updated, or is that just sort of set in audio stone at this point? Because it is it's iconic, but college football is nothing if not a quote audio machine that is new great stuff every week.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing about our intro. We've used the same intro. We've been doing our show. This is the 15th college football season. We've used that same intro. It's one of maybe 3 sounds on my board that has not changed in 15 years. And we can't find the originals for it. So everything else about our audio setup has changed. Everything. Literally everything. I cannot find the source of that sound. I can't even find the individual clips that comprise that sound. That Lou Holtz sound that we use, I have no idea where that is. I could find Gundy in a heartbeat. Bub Rub, no problem. But the Lou Holtz thing has been whitewashed from memory by ESPN. And so I've considered changing it, but we also have such reaction to it every year. People writing in and saying, oh, you hear the intro for the first time. That's how you know that the college football season is here. So I've wanted to change it for a while. I suspect at some point in the near future we will, just to keep it fresh. But whatever we change it to would definitely have to pay homage in some sense to what we've used for the last 15 years. Otherwise, I think it would make people angry.
Well, he's been there still. I don't think you can change it until he leaves Oklahoma State. I don't know if he ever leaves Oklahoma State. He's a guy who I think's going to be buried on that sideline whenever he croaks. He is Oklahoma State.
I definitely associate your intro with college football much more than anything that Dig and Rich has ever sung. So I just want you to know that it's really important to me.
Thank you, P. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's such an iconic quote, the I'm a man, I'm 40. It's such an iconic thing. And if anything highlights the utter lunacy of college football, it was that press conference. I mean, just a guy up there just rattling stuff off. And so I'm hesitant to change it just because it's been very central to our show for all these years. And maybe modifications for it. Like Jimbo had some quotes in the offseason, right? With respect to Saban. And there was definitely a conversation around like, how do we add Jimbo to this thing? Like, is there something that we pull out and add Jimbo in its place? And because I can't find the damn source material for the original intro, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. So we'll see.
Yeah, the sport is the sport is just the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, you think about, all the Brian Kelly stuff, South Carolina Cock Commander, this week's fake cameos with Bob Stoops, or not fake cameos, but like
Brian
full cameos. What other sport in the world delivers like this so consistently?
It's so dumb. It is so dumb. The closest go by is probably Premier League soccer. Probably. And it's not an exact 1-to-1, but you have about the same amount of chaos, let's say, in the Premier League, especially when it comes to like their transfer portal, right? The transfer window.
Yeah.
There's so much ridiculousness that goes on over in the Premier League. And there is that sense of nobody's really running this thing, right? Like, who's in charge of? No one's in charge of this. And that's really what makes college football unique here in America, for sure. Every other thing you could point to a governing body of some sort that is running the operations, right? The NFL has the commissioner. Every pro sport has a commissioner. Even other college sports, they lean a little bit more heavily on the NCAA as a governing institution. College football has basically thrown that idea out. Nobody's running this thing, and that's what makes it unique. And I think that's what helps produce some of these just lunatic moments that we've seen over the years. There's nothing to suppress it. The only thing to suppress it is booster dollars. And you see what we saw happen this past week with Scott Frost. That's the only thing that can shut people up. Otherwise, it's complete madness all the time. And that's why we love it.
Well, I'm at the Lead One meetings right now where they will spend all day talking about the future governance of college football, to which I say, leave it as is, because it's given us so much great material. I mean, even we didn't even get into like we didn't even get into like the quotes that are great because they're delivered poorly. Like Gundy's line when he beat Notre Dame was something along the lines of, "We got a brand too," and it like was supposed to be galvanizing for Oklahoma State fans, but it just came out funny. It didn't really add up. It didn't really make sense. Brian Kelly's family thing should probably be in your intro. Now that I think of it, that I think would be a very appropriate one. But he had a funny one this week, kind of funny for Brian Kelly, where I don't know if you guys saw where he showed up to the press conference late and he had a $10 bill and he said he's donating it. But even that, like, I was with someone yesterday who knows Brian Kelly who said, "Did you see what Brian Kelly did?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "It was actually pretty funny. If only that guy could actually deliver a joke. He just never can get the timing, keep the timing right."
Well, I mean, 2 points on that, right? And talk about drawing a difference between college and pro. In college, guys like Dabo Swinney are elevated to the point where everyone wants to know, well, at least within the programs, reporters want to know what they think on other life things. You don't really get that question in the NFL. Like, no one's asking Brian Dable.
Campbell, nobody cares about Dan Campbell's thoughts on that.
Right, but like somebody will ask Dabo a question that he is in no way qualified to answer, just because he has been elevated to this position of prominence, whether by contract or by the respective fan base. And that's what I think produces some of these crazy moments. These guys are asked questions that they're in no. I asked Kirk Ferentz, I talk about this all the time on the show. At one of the national championship games, we had Kirk Ferentz on, and I interviewed him. Nice guy, very football focused. And we asked him, like, "Yeah, what do you watch on Netflix?" And he looked at us like we had two heads. He had no idea. No, in his mind, he answered. I think he answered with MASH, MASH is the show that I watch on TV. I mean, they haven't made MASH in 50 years.
Wow, that really explains a lot.
Well, it does, right? Because you put these guys in a situation where they're forced to answer like real world questions. They don't know the answer. In a way, I feel bad for them. They have no idea. They're football coaches. They're so focused on football. And I think fan bases, again, whether because they're kind of like the top dog in the program or because they get paid so much, for whatever reason, they get asked ridiculous questions about other football adjacent things. And that's where you get these goofy, these goofy types of answers. At least in Brian Kelly's case, he's fairly good at politicking. You know, yes. He knows to some extent how to stay out of the muck and to keep his head above water. The transition to Southern Brian Kelly, though, has been a lot of fun. I mean, it wasn't just a family thing. He started saying program.
He started with that.
He started replacing the A with a U. And he's trying to push in on some of the soft spots and make himself seem a little bit more Southern. And that has been just a joy to watch. I am openly rooting against Brian Kelly every week. I am the scorned Notre Dame fan. I'm openly rooting against him. I understand why he did it. You know, I hope for his sake and for his family that they can finally win the big one and get a championship and that it goes well for him. But as a scorned Notre Dame fan, I am rooting for the maximum possible hilarity to ensue every week.
We're not that far off from that point.
If Brian Kelly, in a crazy world, he says, I want to come back to Notre Dame next year, and Notre Dame goes 7-5 this year, what is your reaction to that? Tyler Brad, is it to hell with you, or is it, all right, you never know what you got till it's gone?
Wow.
Wow, it's a good one.
Matt, I don't know if you're allowed to ask that question on this show. So what's the scenario? Notre Dame goes 7-5. Brian Kelly is canned from LSU and says, I want to come back.
Just says, hey, I'll take a pay cut. I'll do whatever. I'm not a Southern guy. I miss it there. I still got house, family, et cetera there. Like in this hypothetical.
No, dude, screw him. No chance.
Yeah. I think that's the general sentiment, even no matter how bad this year goes.
He flew in flew in, whatever, under the cover of night. Pete, you could probably give the chronology here better than me, but showed up for 42 seconds and gave a farewell speech and then left. Like, no. To my knowledge, he didn't take out a full page ad in the South Bend Tribune or anything. He just sort of bolted. He pulled a Lincoln Riley and just, I'm out. So no, we'll ride or die here with Marcus Freeman and see where this thing goes in the short term. But I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, I think that's one of the many things that the wind at Marcus Freeman's back is he's not Brian Kelly. And like
exactly.
every time I think of them together, what was the movie? It's like Will Smith and Kevin James, or like Hitch, or I don't know.
Hitch,
what it was.
Yeah, that was Hitch.
Yeah, I just think of the movie poster of them together, and it's like that looks like Marcus Freeman and Brian Kelly together. Like that's how I imagine them. One being hip, young, and cool, and the other one decidedly not. So, at some point in this Notre Dame season, Notre Dame's greatest win won't be Florida State beating LSU. Maybe that will happen this weekend against Cal. Maybe it'll happen against North Carolina. Clemson down the road, who knows? But Ty, we appreciate you coming on the show. If any of our listeners are not also listening to a Solid Verbal, I would just wonder what's wrong with you. That you should have listened to them long before the Shamrock, and in addition to us now, because it is really the most fun I have recapping the college football slate, because probably like a lot of listeners to the show, I'm so in the weeds with Notre Dame that I miss a hell of a lot of other good stuff. And you guys do a great job of getting me up to speed and making me laugh out loud while I'm walking my dog or mowing my lawn. So I appreciate the Solid Verbal. I just want to
thank you.
The record.
I appreciate that. And, I know we've had folks come over from the Shamrock over the years, but would welcome all college football fans. Solidverbal.com is the website, or just search for it wherever you listen to Pete and Matt's show here at the Shamrock. We've been doing this since 2008, which is definitely it makes us feel old. We are much older than we were when we started this thing, but it's still a lot of fun. We try to zoom out and cover college football from the national perspective and make it fun. The sport is really dumb. It is really dumb. It's really ridiculous. We joke often that it's scaffolding on top of scaffolding on top of scaffolding. Like there's no one really running this thing or making sure it's going to be okay in a year. So we try to have fun with it and give you enough of what you need to know to really have a good sense for what's going on out there.
Awesome. Appreciate you joining us, Ty. Good luck the rest of the season, both personally and on your own show.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Same to both of you.